But I'm just going to move us on now to another graveyard um, where we are going to hear from Ros Anderson about the digital technology in the graveyard, the experiences of using the Echoes app at Dunblane.
Can you see my slides there?
We can see your slides, and now we can see it full screen. That's splendid. Thank you so
much. Okay, thank you. Dunblane Cathedral's graveyard, including some 600 headstones, surrounds the medieval cathedral and has been in use since at least the Reformation. Not long after the Reformation, when only the chancel was used as the parish church, the roof of the nave fell in due to lack of maintenance. The nave was used by the families who claim burial rights there and has a lot of gravestones in it. However, most of these were covered during the cathedral restoration at the end of the 19th century, so now only 12 ledger stones can be seen incorporated in the floor. The actual graveyard, unfortunately, there are a few 18th century headstones with memento mori and trade symbols, and they're so eroded it's almost impossible to tell what's on them. These, however, are part of recent conservation work by Historic Environment Scotland to save what's left, which includes these headstones wearing rather fetching white Tyvek jackets during the winter to protect them from frost. The graveyard has seen change over the time, as it was once contained the jail, the parish school and the United Presbyterian Session House, as well as rows of houses on the east and south side, which have all since been taken down. We have a distinct, busy minister's corner, perhaps a legal corner, and unusually several plots for stillborn babies. There's a great range of Victorian-style headstones made by leading monumental sculptors from all over the country, including Aberdeen, Edinburgh and Glasgow, as well as local ones from Stirling and Dunblane. Of particular interest is the fact that there are about 60 to 70 much older flat stones buried underneath the turf. And the Society of Friends is in the process of working with Historic Scotland to hopefully excavate a couple of these in the near future. The Society of Friends of Dunblane Cathedral is the oldest Society of Friends in Scotland. Formed by Reverend Hutchison Coburn, it held its first festival in 1930, not long after the first UK Society of Friends group was formed in 1927 at Canterbury and 28 in York. As well as a yearly festival, the Society carries out projects to enhance the cathedral, produces a journal each year, and members lead tours in the cathedral on set days throughout the year. Recently, we produced 2 books on the fabulous stained glass, as well as a booklet on the graveyard and one on the organ. The Society also provides support to the Leighton Library and Dunblane Museum, both of which I would encourage you to visit. The objectives of the Society include safeguarding the amenity of the cathedral and beautifying its surrounding, as well as encouragement of research into its history, both of which include the graveyard, of course. So with this in mind, we produced a tour in 2024 called Burns, Byron and Bridgerton, The Buried Stories of Dunblane Cathedral's Graveyard, which can still be booked if you're interested, but due to the nature of the site has had some issues. Just before COVID, Historic Scotland discovered that they actually owned the graveyard, and as a result, inspections had to be carried out, with the result that there were a lot of Heras fencing was erected. This has been reduced somewhat, but is still very noticeable in all areas. Due to the fencing, lots of headstones are less accessible than others, some totally inaccessible, and the route is therefore limited for a tour. Though Society of Friends guides are excellent and very familiar with the cathedral history, the graveyard tour was completely new and less familiar, so guides were reluctant to lead on it. Promotion and booking we found through Eventbrite was quite difficult. People often booked and then didn't turn up, which led to issues as our numbers had to be limited to 10. It's been extended now to 15, but then it has to be a shortened tour. The tour is also dependent on the availability of guides, which I'm sure all groups will suffer from because the same people tend to volunteer for lots of projects. So you're in competition with all of the volunteer projects. But the main factor for us has been the Scottish weather. We've been very unlucky, I think, because we've only had about 2 days where it hasn't very properly poured down with rain. So I'm sure there's lots of these factors would be familiar with other groups. Therefore, when the Echoes app was suggested by a Hess colleague, we could see that this would be a great way to overcome many of these issues. Echoes is a geolocated audio tour app. Basically, what you do is create an echo at a specific place, for example, at a headstone, which then triggers on your phone as you walk up to it so that it then plays a recording. If you search graveyards on the Echoes app website, this is what it comes up with. You can see there on the image. And to create a tour, a very brief explanation, you start writing your scripts, you get them recorded in MP3 format. You can do that on your phone. And if it doesn't save it in MP3 format, you can do that online. Select images to go with each headstone. And then the creator on the website starts off by giving the tour the name, positions an echo on the map, and then adds the image and the MP3 file of the recording. The best thing to do then is actually go down and out and test it to make sure that the echo is in the right position, because if it's not, you need to go back to your desktop rather than your mobile phone to reposition it. You can do this by creating it in draft mode or just creating a test piece which isn't open to the public, and keep going backwards and forwards to make sure you get it right. Once all the echoes are in the right place and you're happy with the changes, you can then move it from being private or draft into public mode on the website, generate a QR code, and it's good to go. The tour will then appear in your local area of the app, and visitors can find it by downloading the QR code as well. This is what ours looks like. In the description, you get the opportunity to put in all your health and safety advice, credits, etc. For our first tour, we went for what was our obvious strength, which is the cathedral, and have included cathedral connections in it. However, as these were all men, I decided I would put out a joint one with a tour all about women. We are very lucky because we have lots of people both in the Society of Friends, at the museum and the Leyden Library who were willing to be narrators. And I also asked some of my colleagues at Historic Scotland to help out with the women's tour. They just did the narration, of course, and were very helpful. And that was very successful, particularly as there was one story that involved a successful stonemason returning from Australia to make sure his aunt was put on the family headstone, and that was read by a female stonemason. To show you how it works for the user, this is a sort of step-by-step. You scan the QR code and then you have the app. Then you go into the app and find the tour that's near you. Like I said, for us, we've got 2 to choose from. Once you choose your tour, it will then ask you if you want to stream or download it. Either should work. I haven't worked out whether one's better than the other. Next, it asks you for audio quality. There is only one unless you're paying for it, and the basic one works fine. And once you've done that, the map area that you've created appears, and you are represented by this little teardrop that walks around as you walk around. Every so often, if it gets lost or you're going round and round in circles or you feel like you can press the locate me button and it will rejig itself. That also helps if it's dropped the signal. Then as you walk up to one of the echoes, which are the circles, it should start talking to you. And on some phones, we'll show you the images. However, what we've found is that a lot of phones work quite differently. So sometimes you get a really good image, as in number 6 here, and in others, you just get to see the actual titles. So it does depend on your phone how quickly it picks up how this app works, basically. The recordings are all on a loop, so you can listen to them again if you miss anything. The advantage of the app, from what we've seen, is obviously that it's free, both for the creator and the user. Visitors don't need to depend on a human guide, obviously. It can be accessed and used at any time of the day. No weather issues, obviously, unless somebody wants to go out in the rain and try and use it. Tours can be adapted, and this is very useful for us. So if there was a situation where one of the headstones had to have work done onto it, you could just take that particular echo off. You wouldn't have to cancel the whole tour. I found that it gives a very positive vibe from narrators because they kind of take ownership of the person that they've been talking about, and it just gives other people a involvement in it. All the echoes can be done in any order, so it's not like you have to wait in a queue or anything like that. And you do have to actually come to the site to do it. You can't sit at home and listen to them, which personally I think is a good thing rather than a bad thing. The disadvantages are that it does require a decent mobile phone signal. It seems to show quite differently on different mobile phones, and that's not just a difference between iPhones and Androids either. Different Android phones seem to show it differently. So if you're asked, or I'm asked, why aren't I seeing this? There's nothing I can do about that because you can only do the basic setup. It's difficult to have two headstone echoes which are close together because you do want to make the echo quite large so that you can actually pick it up. So the smaller you make them, if you're having two headstones together, that's probably not going to work. Also, I found it quite tricky to edit the images, but it is doable. You just need to play around with it a bit. Not having to pay a subscription is good, but unfortunately, if you were wanting to charge to make an income from it, you would have to pay a subscription. The other niggle is that you do have to pay a subscription if you want to know how often it's used, which is not great. However, nothing's perfect and it is free. My tips or suggestions for anybody who wants to give it a try is that when you're originally writing the narrations, they are quite different from the way that you would just write a piece that you were reading in your head. I would suggest that you read them out loud a few times and remember that whoever is going to read the piece might not read them the same way that you read it. Not every story works. There was a couple that I dropped, mainly because they were too depressing, actually. You are in a graveyard, obviously, so the clue is in the title, but some can be too depressing, I think. Having different people narrating them all works really well, especially different age groups as well, because a variety is really nice. But also tell the people who are narrating that they aren't professionals and mistakes are perfectly acceptable. It also proves that they've been not been done by AI. My other suggestion would definitely be not to let it go over about 5 minutes as well. 3.5 is probably about the best. There's always the option to do a part 1 and a part 2, of course. Another point that we are going to have to work on, I think, is the fact that you need to make sure you can number or identify the headstone that they're looking for, that it's being talked about as well as it being on the app. So either having stake numbering or some sort of, even a sticker. Because it's a Historic Scotland site, we can't do that, but you need to put up some sort of markering system. And also it's a good idea, which is what we did, to have an introduction to the site. And ours is done by the chairman of the Society of Friends, who's also the minister, Reverend Rennick. And just maybe as a backup, if it's possible, consider having a hard print available for anyone with accessibility issues. As a backup, we've also been looking into Bloomberg Connects. This is also a free app. It's being used by the Leighton Library and it does work differently, but I think it's a good idea to have a look at it as a backup situation. It's a more stable method and a stronger site, but requires an awful lot more input. The work is done by Bloomberg editors as well, and it takes quite a while. I know the Leighton Library, it said it took them a few months to get it off the ground. And it also works in a different way because you don't get the talking tour effect that echoes give. However, if you've done all the work on the echoes and then wanted to do what we might do, which is be using the Bloomberg Connects, the work you've done is all transferable. So it's not like it would be going to waste. And it is good to have a backup after doing all that work as well. As I said before, I'd recommend a visit to the Cross at Dunblane to see the Leighton Library, where you can see Bloomberg Connects in progress as well, the Dunblane Museum, and of course the Echoes app tour at the graveyard. We've got plenty of plans for the future. For example, the Cathedral Connections tour we're going to do in both French and German. We benefit from having lots of tourists to the site, obviously, because it's a Historic Scotland one. And these are all written up. We've just got to get them recorded. And we've got lots of ideas for future themes, particularly the military one. Dunblane has lots of military links with the Queen Vic School and Stirling Castle being not too far away. I've been asked by visitors a fair few times whether we would do that, and even had ex-military personnel offering to do the narrations already. So I think the world is our oyster for what topics we can think of for doing in the future. Lots of plans. And if anybody else wants to try the Echoes app, I'd be more than willing to help give some advice on it. Thank you for listening.
That is brilliant. Thank you so much, Ros. That was a tour de force again of how to build an app. And I think everybody looking at the comments was really inspired by that as a really cost effective and hopefully straightforward plan in terms of using this kind of free software. A couple of the questions that were posed, I think you managed to answer as you went through. So one of the questions was, is there an opportunity to use different languages to English to create the app? And I think you managed to answer that question. I had kind of a quick question was, is there a way for people to feed back on
Not
their
really.
experience?
I have put the QR code is on the notice board on the graveyard at Dunblane Cathedral, and I put my email address on that because I am very willing for anybody to feed it straight back to me. I am the creator for our one, so it would have to come back to me anyway. And it is definitely getting promoted in Dunblane Cathedral by the stewards there too, and they know that they have my email address to feed it back to. I'm more than willing to listen to what people have to say about it, because that's the only way I can learn to tweak it if that's what needs to happen as well. So I would be very interested to hear what the feedback is.
Brilliant. So did you kind of create a focus group then? Did you kind of create your tour and then kind of road test it to get some feedback from willing guinea pigs?
I did from my Historic Scotland friends, but also Society of Friends members went out and did a few tests for me as well, which is why it was quite frustrating, because it came back that every single person's mobile phone it looked different on, which is there's nothing you can do about that really. So long as, for me, I think so long as the echoes actually start talking to you, that's the basics of it, and that's what you want it to do. So I think the images are probably secondary to the actual purpose of the app, which is to have the sound coming out at you, which is what it does. It does work once your phone gets used to the using of the app, I think.
Fantastic. I think that what I picked up on as well was just how helpful creating the content and building the app and people using the app was for encouraging stewardship amongst the volunteers
Yes,
at the site, and that's such a positive thing to be able to nurture.
it does.
I
Yeah.
wondered if you wanted to say any more about that.
I've been trying, I think it's something that will maybe progress better in the future once everybody understands what it is that we're actually doing, if you see what I mean. So as people hear other local people's voices telling stories, that will have a trigger effect, a kind of domino effect of other people thinking, oh yeah, I'd quite like to speak about somebody. Do you have anybody that I could talk about? Especially for the military ones. For this military one, I've had lots of people who want, oh yes, putting their hands up saying, I'd like to do the military one. I'd like to talk about her, because we've got Grace Sharp, for example, who's a Commonwealth Grave headstone. So people genuinely coming forward wanting to do the narration for these people, which is a very big positive. I should say that the actual narrations are only being translated because one of our members, Ewing Wallace, is a former language teacher, so he has himself translated them all and he's going to get them recorded. I think with the Bloomberg app, they can be translated automatically. I'm not too sure about that, but the translation has to be done by another member of the Society of Friends. It's not an automatic thing into different languages.
So having that kind of skill set available is
Yes,
fantastic.
very, very,
Really, really lucky.
yeah. Uh-huh.
That sounds brilliant. So I created a kind of trail using History Pin, which was, again, it was quite straightforward to use. There was a small fee involved in being able to
Right.
use it. But it seems to me that it would be a useful task for the the Legacies in Stone project, maybe to start compiling a list of these kind of free or kind of quite cheap to use
Yes. And how they work
digital
best.
resources.
Yeah. And how they work best and what works best for your setup. It was important for us that we had one that we could, for me anyway, because I do work for Historic Scotland at the site. I knew that what the restrictions were, and that we needed to have something that we could adapt when work was being carried out on site. So if, for example, a whole area needs to be cut off because the Historic Scotland are working on it, we can just take off those echoes and put them back on again at a future date. So that's why that works very well for us, I think.
Well, that was absolutely brilliant. And I'm sure you will have inspired many people, many groups to go off and create their own echoes.
Good, great.
That's fantastic.